The wagon wheels groaned against the rutted trail as Clara Mae Thompson guided her team through the last bend before home. Wyoming stretched endlessly before her. Sage and dust painting everything the color of forgetting. But she couldn't forget. Not with his letter pressed against her ribs, tucked inside her bodice where it had lived for 3 months now. The Thompson ranch appeared like a ghost through the afternoon haze, weathered boards gone silver with neglect, fence posts leaning like drunken men. Her father had written that things were bad, but seeing it made her chest tight. She'd been gone 8 months. 8 months since she'd fled Montana territory in the middle of the night, leaving behind everything that mattered. Leaving behind Eli Barrett. Clara pulled the horses to a stop beside the well, her hands trembling slightly as she wrapped the reins. The letter crinkled against her stays when she climbed down. She'd read it so many times the paper had gone soft at the creases, but she couldn't bring herself to destroy it. It was the last thing he'd sent, 2 weeks after she'd disappeared without explanation. "Clara," it began, in his careful script. "I keep thinking you'll walk through my door come morning. Keep setting 2 plates at supper like a fool. Rory says I should forget you. But how does a man forget the sun?" She pressed her palm against her chest, feeling the paper through the fabric. Inside the house would be her father, probably drunk again. Inside would be questions about why she'd come back, about what happened to the teaching position she'd supposedly taken in Cheyenne. Inside would be lies. But first, she needed to breathe. Clara unhitched the horses with practiced movements, her mind drifting back despite her best efforts. Montana seemed like a dream now, those golden months when she'd believed love could be enough. When Eli's smile across the Saturday dance floor could make her forget she was just Clara Mae Thompson, daughter of a failing rancher, with rough hands and no prospects. The horses watered. She finally forced herself toward the house. The door hung crooked on its hinges. "Papa!" her voice echoed in the dim interior. Dust motes danced in the slanted light from a broken shutter. "That you, girl?" Samuel Thompson's voice came from the kitchen, thick with whiskey despite the early hour. She found him at the scarred table, a half-empty bottle before him. He looked older than his 50 years, gray stubble covering cheeks that had gone hollow. His eyes, when they found hers, held a mixture of relief and accusation. "So, you're back." "I'm back." Clara removed her traveling bonnet, shaking dust from her dark hair. "Teaching job didn't work out." She met his gaze steadily. "No, it didn't." Samuel grunted, taking another pull from the bottle. "Just as well. Need help here anyway. Lost the eastern pasture to the bank. Got maybe 20 head left, and half them are poor stock." Clara moved to the stove, checking for wood. Empty, like everything else here. "I'll start supper once I get the wagon unloaded." "There's a letter came for you," Samuel said suddenly. "Month ago, maybe more. From Montana." Her hand stilled on the stove handle. "Where is it?" "Burned it." He didn't look at her. "Figured whatever cowboy you were running from didn't need to know where to find you." The words hit her like a physical blow. She gripped the stove to keep standing. Another letter from Eli. Destroyed. What had it said? Had he forgiven her? Had he moved on? "You had no right," she whispered. "I'm your father. I got every right." Samuel's voice turned mean, the way whiskey always made it. "You think I'm blind? Girl, think I didn't know why you really went to Montana to chase after some cowboy who'd never amount to nothing?" Clara closed her eyes. Her father didn't know about Eli. He thought she'd gone to Montana for teaching work. Same lies she'd told everyone. But somehow, he'd guessed part of the truth. "I came back, didn't I?" she said quietly. "Yeah, you came back. Broken and done, by the look of you." Samuel stood unsteadily. "Just like your mother. Always thinking there was something better out there than what you had." He shuffled past her toward his room, leaving Clara alone in the kitchen that smelled of old grease and despair. She sank into a chair, finally pulling Eli's letter from her bodice. The paper was warm from her skin. "I dream about you. The letter continued. Dream you're sitting on the porch darning socks while I fix the corral gate. Simple things. Then I wake up and remember you're gone. And it's like losing you all over again. Clara traced the words with one finger. She'd left because she was scared of being just another ranch wife. Scared of disappearing into a life of hard work and babies. Scared of ending up like her mother. Dead at 35 with nothing to show for it but a grieving daughter and a bitter husband. But mostly, she'd been scared of how much she loved him, how completely Eli Barrett had claimed her heart without even trying. The wind picked up outside, rattling the loose shutters. It sounded like Montana wind, wild and free, carrying the scent of pine and possibility. She could almost hear Eli's voice in it, low and warm. Dance with me, Clara May. Let them all watch and wonder how I got so lucky. She'd danced with him that last night, knowing she would leave before dawn. He'd held her like something precious, whispered promises into her hair about the house he'd build her, the life they'd have. Good promises. Real promises. The kind a man like Eli would kill himself trying to keep. That's why she'd run. Clara folded the letter carefully, returning it to its place against her heart. Tomorrow she'd start fixing what could be fixed: the fence, the shutters, maybe even her father if the whiskey hadn't taken him too far. She'd work until her hands bled, until she was too tired to dream. But tonight, with the wind howling like a lonely thing, she let herself remember. Remember how Eli's hands felt holding hers. Remember the way he said her name like a prayer. Remember the last words he'd written. I haven't slept right since you left. The bed's too cold, the night's too long. I know I shouldn't hope, but I keep watching the road. If you ever change your mind, Clara May, I'll be here. I'll always be here. She pressed her fist against her mouth to hold back the sob that wanted to escape. Somewhere in Montana, Eli Barrett was probably finishing his evening chores, probably still setting 2 plates at dinner like the fool he'd called himself. Still waiting for a woman who'd proven herself unworthy of such devotion. The wind howled harder, and Clara May Thompson sat alone in her father's failing house, carrying a good man's last letter like a burden and a blessing both, knowing she'd given up the only thing that ever made her feel whole. The rooster crowed, but Eli Barrett was already awake, had been for hours, same as every night since she'd left. He lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling beams he'd hewn himself, counting the knots in the wood like they might add up to some answer he'd missed. 312 days. That's how long Clara May had been gone. He swung his legs out of bed, feet finding the cold floor by habit. No use pretending sleep would come now. Outside, the Montana sky was just starting to lighten, painting the mountains purple-gray. Beautiful country, empty country, without her in it. Eli pulled on his work clothes, movements mechanical. The coffee pot sat where he'd left it on the stove. Grounds from yesterday still in it. He should have cleaned it, should have done a lot of things. Instead, he just added water and set it to boil, the bitter taste of reused grounds matching his mood. The kitchen table held 2 plates, like always. He stared at them, then slowly put one back in the cupboard. Tomorrow, he told himself. Tomorrow he'd stop setting her place. But he'd been saying that for 10 months now. Outside, his ranch spread before him in the early light. Good land, hard won, 40 head of cattle, a dozen horses, hay meadows stretching to the foothills. Everything a man needed to build a life. Everything except someone to build it with. Morning, you sorry excuse for a cowboy. Eli didn't turn at the sound of hoofbeats. Rory McKenna had taken to checking on him most mornings, wearing his deputy badge like it gave him the right to meddle. Rory. Eli headed for the barn, his friend falling into step beside him after tying his horse. You eat anything yesterday? Coffee counts. Like hell it does. Rory studied him with sharp eyes. You're getting thin as fence wire. Eli? And that beard makes you look like some mountain hermit. Eli ran a hand over his jaw. He hadn't shaved in... couldn't remember when... hadn't seen the point. Got work to do. They entered the barn. the familiar scent of hay and horses wrapping around them. Eli's gelding, Moses, nickered softly, and he moved to the stall, running his hands over the animal's neck. "She ain't coming back," Rory said quietly. "You know that, don't you?" Eli's hand stilled on Moses's coat. "Got work to do," he repeated. "For God's sake, Eli." "Leave it!" His voice came out harder than intended. "Softer," he added. "Please." Rory sighed, but helped him saddle the horses without another word. They rode out to check the herd, breath misting in the cool morning air. This was better. Working, moving, not thinking about how Clara used to ride beside him on mornings like this, her laughter carrying across the meadows. They found the cattle grazing peacefully, counted heads, checked for injuries. Normal things. Eli tried to lose himself in the routine, but his mind kept drifting. To the last letter he'd sent, months ago now, to the silence that had answered it. "That heifer's limping?" Rory pointed out. Eli dismounted to check, running practiced hands down the animal's leg. Just a stone bruise. He treated it while Rory watched, and when he looked up, his friend's expression had gone thoughtful. "You know what you need a drink. Tonight. $1. No arguments." "Not interested." "Wasn't asking." Rory's tone brooked no argument. "You're coming to town, having a whiskey, and acting like a human being for one damn evening. Maybe talk to someone besides that horse of yours." Eli stood, wiping his hands on his chaps. "Moses is better company than most. That's what I'm talking about. You're turning into some kind of ghost. Eli, she wouldn't want—" "Don't," the word came out sharp enough to cut, "don't tell me what she'd want." They finished the morning's work in silence, but Rory's words stuck like burrs. That evening, Eli found himself in town despite his better judgment, nursing a whiskey at the $1 while the usual crowd carried on around him. "Eli Barrett, as I live and breathe." Susanna Winters appeared at his elbow, red dress bright as a cardinal. She worked the saloon, pretty enough to turn heads but smart enough to know which ones to turn from. "Haven't seen you in an age." "Been busy." She studied him with knowing eyes. "Been mourning, more like, that girl really did a number on you." Eli took another sip of whiskey, saying nothing. The whole town knew Clara had left. Small places kept no secrets. They probably laughed about it, the fool cowboy who'd lost his head over Sam Thompson's daughter. "You want some company?" Susanna asked gently. "Just to talk. You look like you could use a friend." "Got a friend." He nodded toward where Rory was failing to impress Mary Sullivan at the bar. "But thanks." Susanna squeezed his shoulder before moving on. Eli nursed his drink, watching the mirror behind the bar. He looked rough. Rory was right about that. Hollow-eyed and gaunt, like something had eaten him from the inside out, which maybe it had. Later, riding home under stars sharp as glass, he found himself talking to Moses again. Bad habit, but the horse never judged. "I ain't slept right since you left," he said to the night air. Words meant for someone who'd never hear them. "Keep reaching for you in the dark. Keep thinking I'll wake up and this will all be some bad dream." Moses's ears flicked back, listening. "I just want you back. Clara May, that's all. Just want you back." The ranch was dark when he arrived. Empty as always. He tended Moses, checked the other animals, went through the motions that kept a man going when nothing else would. Inside, he sat at the kitchen table with the lamp unlit, darkness pressing close. 2 plates again. He'd forgotten to put the second away. Or maybe he hadn't forgotten. Maybe he was just a fool who couldn't let go, who'd spend his life setting a place for someone who'd made it clear she didn't want it. His mother would have called it faithful. His father would have called it stupid. Eli reached for the empty plate, then stopped. Tomorrow. He'd put it away tomorrow. He climbed the stairs to his cold bed, lay down fully clothed, and stared at the ceiling. Started counting knots again. Sometimes, if he counted long enough, exhaustion would take him for an hour or two. Sometimes he'd dream of her, and waking was like losing her all over again. "I just want you back," he whispered to the empty room. The house creaked around him, settling into night, somewhere out there, under these same stars. Clara May was living her life without him, teaching school in Cheyenne, probably, meeting educated men who could offer her more than a ranch and rough hands, forgetting the promises they'd whispered in the dark. He hoped she was happy, truly, even if it killed him. He hoped she'd found what she'd been looking for. Eli closed his eyes, knowing sleep wouldn't come, and started counting again. 1 not, 2, 3, 312 days since she'd left. He wondered if he'd still be counting at 1,000. At 2,000. He wondered if there was a number high enough to make him stop loving her. Clara May stared at the blank paper for the better part of an hour, her pen poised but unmoving. The lamp flickered in the drafty kitchen, casting shadows that danced like the doubts in her mind. Outside, Wyoming wind howled its lonesome song, rattling windows that needed fixing and reminding her of everything broken in her life. 3 months she'd been back. 3 months of mending fences, both real and metaphorical. Her father had dried out some, enough to help with the ranch work when his hands weren't shaking. They'd saved 15 head of cattle from sale, patched the barn roof, even managed to bring in a small hay crop. But none of it filled the hollow space beneath her ribs where her heart used to beat sure and strong. The letter from Eli, the one her father had burned, haunted her worse than any ghost. What had he written? Had he cursed her for leaving, begged her to return? Or worse, had he simply said goodbye? She couldn't stand not knowing anymore. Clara dipped her pen, hand trembling slightly as she finally touched nib to paper. "Eli," she began, then crossed it out. Too familiar. "Mr. Barrett," too formal. She crumpled the page, started fresh. "Dear Eli, I have no right to write this letter, no right to disturb whatever peace you've found in these months since I left. But I find myself thinking of you when I see the stars, and I wonder if you still see them too, or if I ruined that for you like I ruined everything else." She paused, rubbing her eyes. "How did you apologize for breaking a good man's heart? How did you explain fear so deep it made you run from the only happiness you'd ever known? I won't ask for forgiveness, won't make excuses. But if you still think of me when you see the stars, I'll be at Red Hill come Sunday, 3 o'clock, where we first—" Her pen stilled, where they'd first met. That day seemed like another lifetime now. She'd been traveling to Montana to find work. Her wagon wheel busted on the trail. He'd appeared like something out of a story, leading a spare horse, hat tipped back and smile warm as summer honey. "Looks like you could use some help, miss." Those were his first words to her. She'd been prepared to distrust him. A woman alone had to be careful, but something in his eyes had made her feel safe, protected. He'd fixed her wheel, refused payment, and told her about the teaching position in town that had just opened up. Fate, he'd called it later, after they'd started courting. "You breaking down right there where I'd find you." Clara shook off the memory, forcing herself to finish the letter. "Where we first met, I'll understand if you don't come. I'll understand if you've moved on, found someone worthy of the life you're building. But I needed you to know that not a day has passed when I haven't thought of you. Not an hour when I haven't regretted my cowardice. If you still think of me when you see the stars, I'll be there. Clara." She sealed it before she could change her mind, addressed it with hands that had steadied themselves through sheer will. Tomorrow she'd ride to town, pay Tom Morrison to carry it north. Tom made regular runs to Montana Territory, trading horses. He was discreet, wouldn't ask questions. But tonight, she sat with her letter and her regrets, wondering if she was making things worse. Eli had probably found someone else by now, some steady girl who wouldn't run, who'd appreciate what she had instead of fearing it. The thought sent pain lancing through her chest, but she pushed it down. She'd given up any claim to jealousy when she'd snuck away in the pre-dawn darkness. leaving only a brief note, "I'm sorry, please don't follow." The next morning, she saddled her mare early, before her father woke. Town was a 2-hour ride, and she wanted to be back before the day's work piled up. The letter sat in her saddlebag like a live coal, burning with possibility and dread. Morrison's trading post sat at the end of Main Street, horses tied out front, wagons being loaded. Tom himself stood checking inventory, his weathered face creasing into a smile when he saw her. "Clara May Thompson. Heard you were back." "Hello, Tom." She dismounted, pulling the letter from her bag. "I have a favor to ask." His eyes sharpened when he saw the Montana address, but, true to form, he didn't comment. "Making a run that way Thursday. Can have it there within the week." "Thank you." She paid him, probably too much, but she needed this done right. "It's important." "Always is." He tucked the letter safely away. "You know, I was just up that way last month, saw Eli Barrett at the stockyards. Man looks like he's been rode hard and put away wet, if you don't mind my saying." Clara's hands clenched on her reins. Did he seem well?" Tom's expression softened. "He's upright and working. That's about all I can say. Some hurts don't show on the outside, you know." She nodded, throat tight, and mounted her horse. The ride home seemed longer, weighted with the knowledge that she'd set something in motion that couldn't be stopped. Eli would get her letter within the week. Would read it. Would decide. Sunday was 10 days away. 10 days to wonder, to hope, to prepare for disappointment. That night, she told her father she'd be gone Sunday afternoon. "Where you heading?" He looked up from the harness he was mending. Suspicious. "Personal business." His face darkened. "It's that cowboy. Ain't it the one from Montana?" Clara met his gaze steadily. "I'm 24 years old. Papa, old enough to make my own choices." "Your mother was 24 when she made her choice too. Look how that turned out." The words stung, but Clara held firm. "I'm not Mama, and you're not the man you were before she died. We both know that." Samuel's hand stilled on the leather. For a moment, she saw past his anger to the grief beneath, still raw after all these years. "Just be careful, girl. Hearts don't mend as easy as harness leather." "I know," she said softly. "Believe me, I know." The days crawled by. Clara threw herself into work, fixing everything that could be fixed, preparing for winter. But her mind kept drifting to Red Hill, to that overlook with its wildflowers and mountain views, to the place where Eli Barrett had first smiled at her and changed the course of her life. She'd wait there Sunday, wait and see if the stars still meant something to him, or if she'd destroyed that too. The letter was sent, the invitation made. Now all that remained was to discover whether some mistakes could be forgiven, or whether she'd have to learn to live with the hollow space beneath her ribs for the rest of her days. Saturday night, she stood outside looking at the stars, bright as promises in the clear Wyoming sky. Somewhere in Montana, Eli had her letter by now. Was he reading it, crumpling it up in anger, or was he, maybe, looking at these same stars and remembering? "If you still think of me when you see the stars," she whispered to the night. Tomorrow, she'd have her answer. Tomorrow, at Red Hill, where it all began. The sun hung high and merciless as Clara May guided her mare up the familiar trail to Red Hill. Each hoofbeat echoed her heartbeat. Too fast, too uncertain. She'd arrived early, unable to wait at the ranch any longer, unable to pretend this was just another Sunday. The overlook spread before her, unchanged, the same scattered boulders, the same stubborn wildflowers pushing through rocky soil, the same vast view of the valley below. But she was different. The girl who'd stood here with Eli that first time, laughing at his stories about ornery cattle and midnight lightning storms, seemed like a stranger now. Clara dismounted, tying her mare in the shade of a juniper. 3 o'clock. She'd written. It was barely past 2. She found a flat rock to sit on, smoothing her blue calico dress her best, though it seemed shabby now for such a moment. What did you wear to face the man whose heart you'd broken? Time crawled. She watched shadows shift across the valley, counted hawks circling on thermals, picked at a loose thread on her sleeve until she forced herself to stop. Maybe he wouldn't come. Maybe that was for the best. What could she say that would matter after all these months? Then hoofbeats, distant but steady, climbing the trail. Clara stood, heart hammering against her ribs. She pressed damp palms against her skirt, lifted her chin. Whatever happened, she'd face it standing. Eli appeared around the bend like a vision from her dreams, though the reality made her chest tight with guilt. Tom Morrison hadn't exaggerated. He looked worn down, carved hollow by some inner wind. His clothes were clean but hung looser on his frame, his face shadowed by stubble that wasn't quite a beard. But it was his eyes that stopped her breath, those warm brown eyes that had once looked at her like she hung the moon, now careful and guarded as a herd animal's. He reined in his gelding a good distance away, dismounting with the same easy grace that had first caught her notice. But he didn't approach, just stood there holding Moses's reins, dust settling around his boots, looking at her like she might vanish if he blinked. Neither spoke. The silence stretched between them, filled with everything that couldn't be said. Clara wanted to run to him, wanted to run away, wanted to freeze this moment before words could ruin it. But she'd asked him here. She had to speak first. You came. Her voice sounded strange, too small for the vastness around them. Almost didn't. His was rougher than she remembered, like he hadn't used it much. Changed my mind 3 times on the trail. She nodded, wrapping her arms around herself despite the warmth. I wouldn't have blamed you if you'd stayed away. No. Something flickered in his eyes, anger, maybe, or just old pain. Would have been the smart thing. Rory told me so. Said only a fool meets a woman who already proved she can leave. The words cut clean and deep, but Clara didn't flinch. She'd earned worse than that. They stood 20 feet apart. Might as well have been 20 miles. Eli finally tied Moses to a scrub pine, then moved to one of the boulders, not sitting but leaning against it, still keeping distance between them. Why? The single word carried months of hurt. Clara had practiced speeches, explanations, pretty words to make it all make sense. But facing him now, only the truth would do. Because I was scared. His jaw tightened. Of what of me did I ever? No. She stepped forward without thinking, then stopped when he tensed. Never of you. You were perfect. That was the problem. Confusion crossed his features. He pulled off his hat, running fingers through hair that needed cutting. That doesn't make any kind of sense. Clara, I know. She laughed, but it came out cracked. I was scared of disappearing. Of becoming just another rancher's wife, washing your shirts and raising your babies and losing myself bit by bit until there was nothing left but duty and disappointment. Is that what you thought? His voice went quiet, dangerous. That I'd make you small. Not you. Clara struggled for words. Life, the way it goes. My mother loved my father once. You know, loved him fierce. But the ranch ate her up year by year, the isolation, the work, the children that came too fast and took too much. By the end, she was just empty, going through motions. Eli studied her, and she saw him putting pieces together. Understanding, maybe, but not forgiving. Not yet. So you ran. So I ran. She met his gaze, owning it. Like a coward. In the night, because I knew if I saw your face, I'd never be able to leave. And now? The question hung between them. Clara took a breath, tasting sage and memory. Now I know that empty doesn't come from the life you choose. It comes from the life you run from. I've been emptier these past months than my mother ever was. At least she had love, even if it hurt her. All I've had is regret. Eli shifted against the boulder, And for the first time, she saw past his guard to the exhaustion beneath. "I almost didn't come," he repeated. "Then I remembered how you looked the last time we danced, at the harvest social. You wore that green dress with the little flowers on it." Clara's throat tightened. She remembered that dress, remembered how he'd held her, how the other dancers had faded away until it was just them moving together in perfect time. "You looked..." He paused, searching for words. "You looked like you never wanted to leave, like you were home, in my arms. You looked like home, and I couldn't figure out how I read it so wrong." "You didn't read it wrong." The words came out whispered. "That's why I had to go, because it was real, because I did feel home with you, and it terrified me." "And now?" he asked again. Clara spread her hands, helpless. "Now I'm here, asking for nothing, deserving less. I needed you to know that it was never about you not being enough. It was about me being too afraid to believe I could have something good without losing myself in it." Eli pushed off from the boulder, took a step closer. Just one. "You broke me, Clara." Simple words, simply said. "I've got a ranch, good land, steady work, everything a man's supposed to want, and none of it means a damn thing because you're not there." Tears burned her eyes, but she blinked them back. She hadn't earned the right to cry. "I know." "Do you..." He took another step, another, close enough now that she could see new lines around his eyes, could smell leather and horse and that soap he always used. "Do you know I still can't sleep, right? That I set your place at dinner for 3 months before Rory made me stop? That I wrote you 12 letters I never sent because I didn't know where to send them?" Each word was a stone added to the weight on her chest. "Eli." "I'm not done." He held up a hand. "You left, no explanation worth a damn, just, 'I'm sorry,' like sorry could fix what you tore apart." She waited, knowing he needed to say it all. "But the worst part," his voice dropped, "the worst part is I understood. After the anger wore off, after I stopped looking for you behind every rider on the road, I understood. Your mother, the fear of losing yourself. I got it, and I hated that I got it, because it meant I couldn't hate you proper." "I never wanted you to hate me," Clara said softly. "Would have been easier if I could." He was close enough to touch now, but kept his hands at his sides. "Instead, I just missed you. Every sunrise, every sunset, missed you like a limb gone missing." The tears came then, silent, rolling down her cheeks. "I'm sorry, God, Eli, I'm so sorry." "I know." He reached up, thumb brushing away a tear with a gentleness that broke her heart all over again. "Question is, what now? You planning on running again?" "No." The word came fierce and certain. "Whatever happens, I'm done running. I'll stay in Wyoming, help my father, make whatever life I can. But I'm done being scared of good things." He studied her for a long moment, then stepped back. The loss of his touch was like winter wind. "I need time," he said finally. "Need to think. This isn't... I can't just pick up where we left off. Clara, you understand that..." "I understand." She wrapped dignity around herself like a shawl. "I'm not asking you to. I just needed you to know the truth. All of it." Eli nodded, moved toward his horse, then paused, looking back. "You still staying at your father's place?" "Yes. Maybe I'll write when I've sorted through things." It was more than she'd dared hope for. "I'll be there." He mounted Moses with the economy of movement that marked a lifetime in the saddle. But before he turned to go, he looked at her one more time. "You still think of me when you see the stars?" The question from her letter turned back on her. Clara met his gaze steady and true. "Every night." Something shifted in his expression. Not forgiveness, not yet, but maybe, just maybe, the possibility of it. Then he touched his hat brim and rode away, leaving Clara alone on Red Hill with the wildflowers and the wind and the faintest whisper of hope. The letter came 3 weeks later. Clara had just finished feeding the chickens when she saw Tom Morrison's wagon rolling up the dusty track. Her heart jumped sideways in her chest, hands suddenly clumsy as she set down the feed bucket. She'd been waiting, checking the horizon every day like a fool, but now that the moment was here, she wasn't ready. "Morning, Clara May." Tom climbed down, reaching into his coat. "Got something for you." She took the envelope with trembling fingers, recognized Eli's careful script. "Thank you, Tom." He tipped his hat, climbed back onto his wagon without lingering. Good man. Tom knew when to leave folks to their business. Clara held the letter unopened until his wagon disappeared over the rise. Then she walked to the porch steps, sat down hard, and broke the seal. "Clara, I've started this letter a dozen times. Rory says I'm wearing out good paper, but some things need to be said right. I'm coming to Wyoming. Got business at Fort Laramie next week, buying horses for the Army. I'll be passing through your way Tuesday evening, if you'll have me. There's things we need to say that can't be said in letters. Eli." Tuesday, 4 days away. Clara pressed the letter against her chest, felt her heart beating wild beneath it. He was coming, not promising anything, but coming. She threw herself into preparation, cleaned the house top to bottom, mended the fence gate that had been sagging, even convinced her father to shave and put on his good shirt. Samuel grumbled but complied, sensing the importance even if she hadn't told him the details. Tuesday came gray and cold, October showing its teeth. Clara made stew, baked bread, changed her dress twice before settling on the brown wool that brought out her eyes. Simple, nothing fancy. This wasn't about impressing him, it was about truth. He arrived just as the sun was setting, painting the sky purple and gold. Clara heard the horses before she saw them Eli on Moses, leading a string of 3 fine-looking mares. She stepped onto the porch, wiping nervous hands on her apron. "Evening," he called, swinging down from the saddle. "Evening." She came down the steps, helped him tie the horses at the rail. "You made good time." Weather held. He looked around, taking in the improvements. "Place looks better." "We've been working at it." She hesitated, then plunged ahead. "Will you come in? There's stew, fresh bread." "I'd be grateful." Inside, her father rose from his chair by the fire, sizing up Eli with sharp eyes. They'd never met. Clara's time in Montana had been separate from her Wyoming life. "Papa, this is Eli Barrett. Eli, my father. Samuel Thompson." The men shook hands, measuring each other. Then Samuel surprised her by saying, "Heard you're running cattle up Montana way. Good land up there." "Yes, sir. Got lucky with my claim." "Man makes his own luck, mostly." Samuel moved toward his room. "I'll leave you two to talk. Got some harness work needs doing." Subtle as a sledgehammer, but Clara was grateful. She served the stew, poured coffee, both of them moving careful around each other like the floor might give way. Finally. Dishes cleared and coffee refilled. They sat across from each other at the scarred kitchen table. "Say what you came to say," Clara said softly. Eli wrapped his hands around his cup, stared into the dark liquid. "That night you left, I need to know exactly why. Not the fear part, I understood that when you explained at Red Hill, but why that night, what changed?" Clara closed her eyes, remembering. "You talked about the future that night. After the dance, walking me home, you talked about building a bigger house, maybe running for town council someday. About the children we'd have, the life we'd build. And you said—" She had to push the words out. "You said I'd never have to worry about anything again, that you'd take care of everything." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "And you heard a cage closing." "I heard my mother's life." Clara met his gaze, willing him to understand. "She was brilliant, you know, could figure sums in her head faster than any man, knew Shakespeare by heart. But bit by bit, the ranch wore her down to just wife, mother, cook, until she forgot she'd ever been anything else." "And you thought I'd do that to you?" Not on purpose, never on purpose. But yes. She leaned forward, urgent. Don't you see the very things that made you wonderful, wanting to protect me, provide for me, shelter me? Those were the things that scared me most, because I loved you enough to let myself disappear into the life you were offering. Eli was quiet for a long moment. Then, I've been thinking about that, these weeks since Red Hill, thinking about what I offered you and what I never asked. He looked up. I never asked what you wanted. Did I just assume you'd want what I wanted? Most women would have. You're not most women. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. That's what drew me first place. Remember that argument you got into with Mayor Henderson about women voting? Clara flushed. I may have been a bit forceful. You were magnificent. Stood there in front of the whole town meeting and told him that any woman who could run a household could certainly understand politics. I thought Henderson might swallow his tongue. The smile faded. And then I tried to make you into exactly what you were arguing against. Someone who needed taking care of. It's what men do, Clara said gently. What they're taught to do. Maybe. But it's not what you need. He pushed back from the table, stood to pace the small kitchen. Here's what I've been thinking. I don't want a woman who needs me to handle everything. That's not a partnership, that's a burden. For both people. Clara's heart began to beat faster. What do you want? He stopped pacing, faced her. I want what we had before I started making all those plans. When you helped me with the accounting because you're better with numbers. When we worked side by side at brandings. When you had opinions about everything from cattle prices to territorial politics. And weren't shy about sharing them. People talked. Clara reminded him. Said I was too forward. Too involved in men's business. Let them talk. His voice went fierce. I was an idiot, letting their voices get in my head, making me think I had to protect you from work, from worry, from everything that makes a life real. Clara stood, moved around the table toward him. I should have talked to you instead of running. Should have trusted you enough to say what scared me. And I should have listened to what you weren't saying. He caught her hands, held them gentle. We both made mistakes. Clara, question is, can we make something better from them? She looked at their joined hands, his rough from work. Hers the same. Working hands. Both of them. What would that look like? Don't know exactly. His thumbs brushed over her knuckles. But I know I don't want to lose you again. And I know I don't want you small and scared and running. I want you fierce and stubborn and right beside me. Arguing about cattle prices and teaching me Shakespeare. I don't know any Shakespeare, she admitted. That was my mother. Then whatever you want to teach me. He pulled her closer. The point is, I want you as you are. Not some idea of what a rancher's wife should be. It won't be easy, Clara warned. I'm not good at keeping quiet when I have opinions. I'm counting on it. He released one hand to touch her face. These months without you, I had time to think about what mattered. The ranch is doing well. I've got respect in town, money in the bank, everything a man's supposed to want. But I'd trade it all for another chance with you. A real chance, where we both say what we mean and build something together. Together, Clara repeated, tasting the word. Equal partners. Equal partners. In the ranch, in the decisions, in the life we build. Your name on the deed alongside mine, if you'll have it. Your voice in every choice that matters. Clara's breath caught. Eli Barrett, that's scandalous. People will talk even more. Then we'll give them something worth talking about. His hand moved to cup her cheek. What do you say? Clara May. Want to scandalize the territory with me? She thought about her mother, brilliant and trapped. Thought about herself these past months, free and miserable. Thought about fear and love and the space between them where real life happened. Yes, she whispered. He kissed her then, soft and careful, like she might spook. But Clara May Thompson was done with spooking. She wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him back with all the fierce certainty she'd found in their time apart. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Eli rested his forehead against hers. "No more running." "No more running," she promised. "No more assuming, either. We talk about things, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." He pulled back to look at her. "I love you, Clara. Loved you stubborn. Loved you scared. Love you still. But I want to love you true this time. All of you, not just the parts that fit easy into my life." "I love you too," Clara said, the words coming easier than she'd expected. "And I want to build something with you, something real and messy and ours." Later, after Eli had gone to check on his horses and her father had emerged to share a cup of coffee and size up his daughter's prospects with approving eyes, Clara stood on the porch watching the stars come out. They looked different now, not distant and cold, but close and bright with possibility. She'd thought love meant losing herself, but maybe, with the right person and the right understanding, love meant finding herself instead, finding the courage to be fully who she was, beside someone who wanted nothing less. Tomorrow, Eli would head to Fort Laramie, finish his business, but he'd be back. They'd already started making plans, real plans this time, built on truth and partnership and honest words. The night wind carried the scent of coming snow, the promise of hard seasons ahead. But Clara Mae Thompson wasn't afraid anymore. She had work to do, a life to build, a man to love who loved her back complete and complicated. The stars watched, silent witnesses to all the endings and beginnings, as she went inside to bank the fire and dream of tomorrow. Word traveled fast in small towns, faster still when it involved scandal and heartbreak. Clara first noticed the whispers at Garrison's general store. She'd gone in for flour and salt. Simple enough, but Mrs. Garrison's eyes went wide as Sunday dishes when she walked through the door. "Clara Mae Thompson," the older woman said, voice carrying to every corner of the store. "Heard Eli Barrett's been seen riding this way regular." "He's got business in the territory," Clara replied evenly, selecting her items. "Business?" Mrs. Garrison sniffed. "That what they're calling it now?" Two other women by the fabric counter, Mrs. Henderson and Mrs. Walsh, pretended to examine calico while hanging on every word. Clara felt their judgment like needles in her back but kept her head high. She'd known this would come. "That'll be 40 cents, Mrs. Garrison said, then leaned across the counter. "You know that boy waited for you, turned down Hannah Morrison. And she's quite a catch. Pretty thing, good family. Her father owns the biggest spread south of the Yellowstone." "I'm sure she'll make someone a fine wife," Clara said, counting out coins with steady hands. Could have been Eli's wife, if someone hadn't broken his heart and run off. The word stung, meant to. Clara met the woman's eyes straight on. "Good day, Mrs. Garrison." Outside, she heard the buzz of gossip restart before the door even closed. Let them talk. She had work to do. But the talk followed her everywhere. At the blacksmith's, getting horseshoes, came back when things got hard. Did she poor Eli, taking her back like nothing happened? At the church socials, some men don't know when they're well rid of trouble. The worst came from unexpected sources. Susanna Winters, the saloon girl who'd always been kind, stopped her on the street one afternoon. "Clara Mae." Susanna's painted face was serious beneath her bright bonnet. "Can I speak plain?" "Of course. I saw what you leaving did to that man. He sat in my saloon looking like death warmed over for months. Wouldn't talk to anyone. Wouldn't even play cards. Just nursed one whiskey all night and stared at nothing." Clara's throat tightened. "I know I hurt him." "Do you?" Susanna stepped closer. "Because from where I sit, you got scared and ran, and now that he's doing well, got his ranch profitable, got respect in town, suddenly you're back." "That's not why." "I'm not finished." Susanna's eyes flashed. "Men don't wait like that unless they're stupid or serious. Eli Barrett ain't stupid. So if you're playing with him again, If you're going to break him twice, then you'd best get back on whatever brought you here and leave now. Clara felt anger rise, pushed it down. I'm not playing with anyone. Good. Susanna's expression softened slightly. Because that man deserves someone who sees what they've got. Someone who won't spook at the first sign of serious. You plan on being that someone? I'm trying to be. Susanna studied her for a long moment. Trying ain't the same as doing, but I suppose everyone deserves a second chance, even ones who don't deserve it. She swept away, leaving Clara standing in the street feeling flayed raw. But Susanna was right. Trying wasn't enough. She had to prove herself, to Eli and to everyone who'd watched her hurt him. The opportunity came sooner than expected. Clara had been working on setting up her laundry and mending corner in the empty stall at the livery mister. Peterson had agreed to rent it cheap, and it gave her a way to earn money while staying in town when Eli visited. She was hanging her sign, hand-painted and proud, when she heard the commotion. Fire at the Morrison place. People ran past, heading east toward the smoke rising black against the sky. Clara dropped her hammer and ran too, remembering Hannah Morrison with guilt sharp as glass. The girl Eli could have married, should have married if Clara hadn't existed. The Morrison ranch sprawled impressive even in crisis. Flames licked at the barn roof while men formed bucket lines from the well. Women corralled horses and livestock away from danger. In the middle of it all, Hannah Morrison stood frozen, staring at the burning barn. My father, she said to no one, to everyone. He's inside. He went back for the prize bull. Men looked at each other, calculating odds. The fire had spread fast, fed by dry hay and October wind. Going in now was asking to die. Then Clara saw him. Eli just arrived, swinging down from Moses, already moving toward the barn. Her heart stopped. No, she heard herself say, but he was already wrapping a wet blanket around himself, already pushing through the smoke. Time stretched like taffy. Clara found herself beside Hannah, gripping the younger woman's hand without thought. Hannah squeezed back, their old rivalry meaningless in the face of shared terror. Stubborn fool, Hannah whispered. Always has to be the hero. Always, Clara agreed, chest tight with fear. Smoke billowed thicker. Someone's pocket watch ticked loud in the sudden quiet, counting seconds that felt like hours. Then movement. Eli emerged, half carrying, half dragging Thomas Morrison, both men coughing and black with soot. The crowd surged forward. Doc Matthews took charge of Morrison, who was conscious but barely. Eli dropped to his knees, gasping for clean air. Clara was there before she thought to move, pressing a wet cloth to his face, checking for burns. I'm all right, he wheezed, catching her hands. Clara, I'm all right. Stubborn fool. She echoed Hannah's words, relief making her sharp. You could have died. But didn't. He managed to grin through the soot. Morrison's too ornery to lose, like his daughter. Hannah appeared at Clara's shoulder, tears cutting channels through the ash on her face. Thank you, she said to Eli. Thank you for saving him. Anyone would have. No, Hannah cut him off. They wouldn't. They didn't. She looked at Clara then, something shifting in her expression. Take care of him. He's a good man, better than some deserve. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was acknowledgement. Clara nodded, helped Eli to his feet. Around them, the fire brigade had the flames under control, the barn mostly saved. Crisis passing into story, another tale for winter nights. Come on, Clara said. Let's get you cleaned up. She took him to her father's ranch, closer than town. Samuel took one look at them and started heating water without questions. Clara worked in silence, washing soot from Eli's face and hands, checking each inch for injury. The fear still sat cold in her stomach how close she'd come to losing him again, this time for good. You're angry, Eli observed when she pressed the cloth harder than necessary against a scratch. You could have died. The words came out raw. For a bull and a man who's made no secret of thinking you should have married his daughter. Wasn't about the bull or Morrison's opinions? He caught her hand, stilled its motion. Would you have had me stand there and do nothing? She wanted to say yes, wanted to rage at him for risking himself, but she knew him better than that. The man who'd stopped to help a stranger with a broken wagon wheel would never stand idle while someone needed help. No, she admitted. I'd have thought less of you if you had, but that doesn't make it easier to watch. Now you know how I felt, he said quietly. Watching you walk away. Knowing I couldn't stop you, couldn't follow, just had to stand there and let you go. Clara set down the cloth, really looked at him. Soot still darkened the creases around his eyes, and a red mark on his neck would likely blister. But his gaze was steady, patient, waiting for her to understand. It's not going to be easy, she said, loving someone who runs into burning barns. No easier than loving someone who might run, period. He touched her face gently. But I figure if we both know the risks going in, maybe we can handle them. That night, after Eli had gone back to town and reports came that Thomas Morrison would recover, Clara lay wakeful thinking about fear and love and the courage both required. The townspeople would talk more now about how she'd tended Eli, about Hannah's words, about second chances and whether people deserved them. But Susanna had been wrong about one thing. Clara wasn't trying to be someone who could see what she had. She could see it clear as mountain water, a good man who ran into fires to save near strangers, who loved her enough to risk his heart twice, who wanted a partner more than a possession. Tomorrow she'd open her mending shop, start building something of her own, even as she and Eli figured out how to build together. The tongues would wag, the judgments would come, but she'd faced down her own fears and found them survivable. Let the town talk. She had better things to do than listen. Winter came early that year, November bringing storms that howled down from the mountains like vengeful spirits. Clara had just finished a batch of mending when she heard the first crashes sharp, splintering sounds that meant only one thing. "Roof's going at the livery," someone shouted outside. She grabbed her coat and ran. The livery stable held not just her small mending corner, but 30 horses, including Eli's string he'd brought down for winter trading. The wind hit her like a fist when she stepped outside, snow driving horizontal across Main Street. At the stable, chaos reigned. Part of the roof had already collapsed under the weight of wet snow and wind. Horses screamed in terror. Trapped in stalls as beams groaned overhead, Mr. Peterson stood frozen, watching his livelihood disappear into the storm. "Get them out," Clara shouted over the wind, already moving toward the doors. Others had gathered townsmen, ranch hands passing through. They worked fast, leading terrified horses into the blizzard. Better to risk them scattering than leave them to be crushed. Clara had just gotten a bay mare clear when she heard it, a high, desperate whinny from deep inside. The colt, Peterson's prize yearling, worth more than most men saw in 5 years, trapped in the far stall where the roof sagged lowest. "Leave it!" Peterson grabbed her arm as she turned back. "Building's coming down." But other men were already moving. She saw Jake Sullivan dive back inside. Then Eli, when had he arrived right behind him? Always running toward danger. Her cowboy. The next crash shook the ground. More roof collapsed, sending up clouds of dust and snow. Clara's heart hammered as she helped hold horses, counted seconds, watched the doorway. Jake emerged dragging someone, young Tommy Garrett, the stable boy who must have been trying to save the colt. Blood ran from a gash on the boy's head. But where was Eli? "Get the doc!" someone shouted, and Clara found herself kneeling beside Tommy, pressing her scarf against his wound while others ran for help. The boy was conscious, crying for his mother. "Shh," Clara soothed, though her eyes stayed fixed on the stable. "You're all right. You're going to be fine." Another section of roof went down with a sound like thunder. Then, through the swirling snow, movement. Eli, leading the yearling colt, both of them covered in debris and moving slow, Too slow. He'd made it 3 steps clear when his legs buckled. Clara was running before he hit the ground. The colt danced away, frightened but unhurt, as she dropped beside Eli. Blood soaked through his coat at the shoulder, spreading fast. "Beam caught me," he said, words slurring. "Think it's bad, Clara?" "No." She pressed hard against the wound, felt the warm wet seeping between her fingers. "No, you're fine. You're going to be fine." But his face had gone gray as old snow, and the blood kept coming. Doc Matthews arrived at a run, took one look, and started barking orders. "Get him to my office, now! Keep pressure on that wound." They carried him on a door torn from its hinges, Clara never letting go, her hands slick and red. The doctor's office smelled of carbolic and fear. She stood back only when Doc physically moved her, watched as he cut away Eli's coat, revealed the ugly gash where the beam had torn through muscle down to bone. "Out," Doc ordered. "I need to work." "I'm staying. You're in my way. Out, or he dies." Clara found herself in the waiting room, hands still red, dress soaked with snow and blood. Others had gathered Rory pale and pacing. Mr. Peterson clutching his hat. Even Susanna from the saloon. They sat in terrible silence while Doc worked, while the storm raged, while time crawled like it had forgotten how to move properly. An hour. 2. Clara stared at her hands, at Eli's blood dried in the creases of her palms. He'd gone back for a horse, a valuable horse. Yes, but still just an animal. And now... "Fool man," she whispered. "All the good ones are." Susanna sat beside her, pressed a clean cloth into her hands. "It's what makes them good." "I can't lose him." The words came out broken. "Not now. Not when we just figured out how to be together." "Then don't!" Susanna's voice was fierce. "That man's too stubborn to die. Waited for you all those months, didn't he? He'll wait now. You just gotta wait with him." The door opened. Doc Matthews stood there, sleeves rolled up, exhaustion written in every line of his face. "He's alive," he said, and Clara's knees nearly gave out. "Lost a lot of blood, and infection's always a risk. But if he makes it through the night, I'd say his chances are good." "Can I see him?" Doc nodded. "He's been asking, well, mumbling your name, more like, don't tire him." Eli lay still as death on the narrow bed, bandages wrapped thick around his shoulder and chest. His skin had no color left, looked like candle wax in the lamplight. Clara pulled a chair close, took his hand carefully. "Eli?" His eyes opened, focused with effort. "Clara, the colt!" She laughed, or maybe sobbed. "The colt's fine. You saved it. You saved Tommy Garrett, too." "Good." His fingers tightened weakly on hers. Thought I might not get to see you again." "I'm here." She pressed his hand to her cheek, not caring who might see. "I'm not going anywhere." "Stay." Every minute. He drifted then, in and out of consciousness while she kept vigil. The storm raged until dawn, but Clara barely noticed. She watched him breathe, counted each rise and fall of his chest, whispered prayers to whoever might be listening. Rory brought coffee. Susanna brought a shawl. Doc came every hour to check the bandages, the fever that wanted to rise, and Clara stayed, holding Eli's hand, talking when he seemed to hear her. "Remember when we met," she said during one of the long dark hours. "You fixing my wheel? Refusing payment? I thought you were running some con. No one's that decent without wanting something." A slight smile touched his lips, though his eyes stayed closed. "But you are decent and good and running into burning barns and collapsing stables because that's who you are." Her voice caught. "I love that about you. Hate it sometimes, but love it. Love you." "Love you too," he whispered, surprising her. "Worth it, all of it." Dawn came gray and subdued, the storm blown out, Eli's fever had broken in the night, and though he was weak as a newborn foal, Doc proclaimed him likely to recover. "He'll need care," Doc warned Clara. "Weeks of it. That shoulder won't be right for months." "I'll manage." "At his ranch, that's a long ride from here." Clara looked at Eli, sleeping peaceful now, at this man who'd waited for her, forgiven her, nearly died saving horses and stable boys he barely knew. "Then I'll make the ride, or I'll move there temporary, whatever it takes." Doc studied her over his spectacles. "Going to cause talk, you nursing him unchaperoned." "Let them talk." And they did, but they also helped. Rory organized men to tend Eli's stock. Hannah Morrison sent food and bandages, a peace offering that said more than words. Even Mrs. Garrison grudgingly admitted that someone had to tend the fool man, and better a woman who knew which end of a cow was which. Clara wrote her father, explained she'd be gone for a time. Samuel's reply was brief but accepting. "Take care of your cowboy. Ranch'll keep." The day they moved Eli home, half the town turned out to help. They'd rigged a wagon bed special, made sure the road was clear despite the snow, and when Clara climbed up beside him for the journey to his ranch, no one said a word about propriety or what was proper. Sometimes, she thought, watching Eli sleep as the wagon rolled north, people surprised you. Sometimes a town that judged you for leaving could forgive you for coming back. Sometimes love looked like blood on your hands and vigils in the dark, and choosing to stay when staying was hard. "Almost home," she told Eli when his eyes fluttered open. He smiled, reached for her hand with his good arm. "Already am." And despite everything, the storm, the blood, the fear, the long recovery ahead, Clara found herself smiling too. Home. Yes, that's what this felt like. Finally, impossibly. Like home. The morning routine had become sacred. Clara woke before dawn, stoked the fire, heated water for coffee and washing. She'd check Eli's bandages, help him sit up despite his protests that he could manage. 3 weeks since the stable collapse, and he still moved like every breath hurt. "I can do it myself," he grumbled as she helped him with his shirt. "I know you can." She fastened the buttons with practiced care. "But you'll tear those stitches trying, and then Doc will lecture us both." He caught her hand as she reached for the last button. "Clara, we need to talk about this." She knew what was coming, had been dreading it. After breakfast. But Eli held on. "You've been here 3 weeks. Your father needs you. Your business is waiting." She pulled free, busied herself with unnecessary tasks. Breakfast, then talk. They ate in silence, beans and biscuits. Simple fare she'd learned to prepare in his kitchen. Outside, December pressed against the windows, frost painting patterns like lace. The ranch felt isolated, cut off from the world by winter and distance. Just them and the necessary work of healing. "Rory said the roads are clear enough?" Eli said finally. "You could get back to town today if you left early." Clara set down her coffee cup harder than needed. "Are you asking me to leave?" "I'm saying you have a life beyond nursing a broken-down cowboy." He wouldn't meet her eyes. "This isn't right. You being here, people are talking." "Let them talk. It's your reputation." "Which was already ruined when I ran off to Montana and came back unmarried." She moved around the table, knelt beside his chair. "Do you want me to go?" He looked at her then, and she saw the war in his eyes, propriety against need, pride against loneliness. "No," he admitted. "God help me, no, but—" "Then I'm staying." She stood, decision made. "Until you're healed, until you can manage alone, unless you truly want me gone. I'm staying." Something broke in his expression relief, maybe, or the last wall of stubborn independence. He reached up with his good arm, traced her cheek with careful fingers. Why? Such a simple question, such a complicated answer. Because she'd almost lost him. Because these weeks of simple domesticity had shown her what they could build together. Because leaving felt like tearing off her own arm. Because nothing I ran to was worth more than what I left, she said, echoing her words from Red Hill. And because I'm tired of being scared of what makes me happy. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. All right, but we do this proper. I'll pay you wages, same as I would a hired hand. Eli Barrett, you will not. It's that or I write Rory to come fetch you today. His jaw set in the stubborn line she'd come to know well. I won't have anyone saying you're here for anything but honest work. Clara wanted to argue, but she recognized a battle she couldn't win. Fine, but I'm keeping books on every penny. And when you're well. She let the threat hang, saw him almost smile. When I'm well, we'll settle accounts. The days settled into rhythm, morning chores, checking cattle, mending harness and clothes, all the small tasks that kept a ranch running. Eli directed from his chair, frustrated by inaction but gradually accepting her help. She learned his systems, his preferences, the particular way he liked things done. You're spoiling those chickens, he observed one afternoon, watching her scatter extra grain. They're laying better since I started. She brushed feathers from her skirt. Sometimes a little spoiling does good. That your philosophy, little spoiling? She heard the question beneath the question. When it's earned, when someone's been working hard, doing right, yes. He was quiet after that, thoughtful in a way that made her wonder what was turning in his mind. The breakthrough came, as many things did, unexpectedly. Clara had driven the wagon to the far pasture to check the stock there, leaving Eli with strict instructions to rest. But when she returned, she found him outside, trying to lift a hay bale one-handed. Eli Barrett. She jumped from the wagon before it fully stopped. What in the name of... Horses need feeding. He stood stubborn despite the sweat on his brow, the way his injured arm hung useless. Can't expect you to do everything. I expect you to heal. She moved to take the bale, but he stepped back. I'm not an invalid. No, you're a fool man who'll tear his stitches trying to prove something that doesn't need proving. They stood facing each other in the cold afternoon, both breathing hard, both too stubborn to yield. Then Eli swayed, just slightly, and Clara saw him fight to hide it. Please, she said, softer now. Let me help. It's not weakness to need help. Something shifted in his face. He let her take the bale, followed her to the barn in silence. But when she turned from feeding the horses, he was sitting on a barrel, head in his hands. I can't even feed my own stock, he said to the ground. What kind of man can't do his own work? Clara went to him, stood between his knees, lifted his chin with the gentle fingers. The kind who saved a boy and a valuable horse. The kind who nearly died doing right. The kind who's too proud to see that needing help doesn't make him less. I hate this. The words came raw. Hate being weak. Hate you seeing me weak. Oh, Eli. She framed his face with both hands. You think this is weak fighting to heal, to get back to work, swallowing that pride of yours to let me help? That's not weakness. That's the strongest thing I've ever seen. He looked at her like she'd spoken in tongues. Clara, you want to know why I really stayed? The words tumbled out. Truth she'd been holding back. Because these weeks, seeing you fight through pain, letting me see you frustrated and human and real, it's shown me who you really are. Not the perfect cowboy who swept me off my feet. The real man. And I love him even more. His good arm came around her waist, pulled her close. Say that again. I love you. Simple words, simpler truth. Broken or whole, stubborn or yielding. I love you. He pressed his face against her middle, and she felt him shudder release. Maybe, of all the fear and frustration, she held him, ran fingers through his too long hair, felt something settle between them. Not the wild passion of their early courtship, but something deeper. Partnership, understanding, the kind of love that could weather storms. When I'm healed, he said against her dress, I'm going to court you proper again, Do it right this time." Clara smiled into his hair. "Looking forward to it. But Eli, this is proper. This is right. This is us. Building something real." That evening, she made soup while he sat at the table, actually resting without protest. They talked about the ranch, the plans for spring, the improvements that could be made, practical things. But underneath ran a current of something new: acceptance, trust, the knowledge that they'd seen each other at their worst and chosen to stay. "I never answered your question," Eli said suddenly. "That day at Red Hill, why I wanted you back." Clara paused in her stirring. "You don't have to—" "Yes, I do." He met her eyes across the kitchen. "I wanted you back because even broken-hearted and half-dead inside, I was more alive missing you than I'd ever been before you came. Because you made me think, made me work to keep up, made me want to be better than I was. I wanted you back because my life without you was like trying to breathe underwater. Possible, maybe, but not living." She set down the spoon, went to him. This time when she kissed him, it was soft and sure and full of promise. "No more underwater," she whispered against his lips. "No more running," he answered. "Just us, figuring it out as we go. Together. Together." Outside, snow began to fall, soft and silent. Inside, warmth and soup, and two people learning that love wasn't just the easy times. Love was helping someone with their shirt when pride said they should manage alone. Love was letting yourself be helped when everything in you wanted to be strong. Love was choosing to stay, day after day, and building something worth keeping. The healing would take time. His shoulder, their trust, the life they were carefully constructing. But they had time now, all the time they needed. The spring gathering had been a tradition in Cedar Creek for 20 years, part dance, part social, part celebration of surviving another Montana winter. This year, it held special meaning. The town had weathered storms both literal and figurative, and folks were ready for music and laughter. Clara stood before the mirror in her room at the boarding house, smoothing the blue calico dress she'd finished just that morning. The fabric had cost dear, but she'd wanted something new, something that wasn't touched by memories of leaving or waiting or grief. Her hands trembled slightly as she pinned her hair. "You look beautiful." Mrs. Larson, the boarding house proprietor, stood in the doorway with a knowing smile. "That young Barrett man won't know what hit him." "I don't know what you mean." But Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Course you don't." Mrs. Larson's eyes twinkled. "Just like you haven't been watching the door every evening for the past week, waiting for him to be well enough to come calling proper." It was true. Eli had been back on his feet for a month now, his shoulders still stiff but functional. He'd insisted Clara return to town once he could manage alone, talking about propriety and courtship and doing things right. She'd gone, reluctantly, throwing herself into rebuilding her mending business. But every evening, she watched for him. He'd come by 3 times proper visits in Mrs. Larson's parlor, hat in hand, conversation careful, like they hadn't spent 3 months learning each other's rhythms, hadn't shared truths in his kitchen while winter pressed close. It was maddening and sweet in equal measure. Tonight would be different. Tonight, at the spring gathering, they could dance. The walk to the town hall felt longer than usual, her feet unsure in rarely worn dancing slippers. She could hear the fiddle music from 2 streets away, saw lanterns glowing warm through the windows. Inside would be everyone she knew, everyone who'd watched their story unfold: the leaving, the return, the slow rebuilding. Clara paused at the door, gathering courage. Second thoughts. She turned to find Rory McKenna, dressed in his Sunday best, badge polished bright. "Never." The word came out more certain than she felt. "Good." He offered his arm. "Because Eli's been pacing like a caged cat for the past hour, driving everyone half mad. Man's got it bad." They entered together, and Clara felt the shift in the room, conversations pausing, eyes following. She kept her chin up, smiled at familiar faces. Let them look. She had nothing to be ashamed of. Then she saw him. Eli stood near the punch table, black coat and string tie making him look like something out of a picture book. But it was the cane he leaned on that made her heart catch simple pine, carved with careful hands, still healing, still fighting to be whole. Their eyes met across the crowded room. His face transformed, smile spreading slow and sure as sunrise. He started toward her, progress steady despite the slight limp he'd carry for months yet. The crowd seemed to part, or maybe that was just her imagination. "Miss Thompson!" He stopped before her, formal as any gentleman, but his eyes held heat that made her stomach flutter. Mr. Barrett," she dropped a small curtsy, playing along. "Might I have the pleasure of this dance?" Clara glanced at the dancers whirling past, then at his cane. "Can you?" "Doc says I shouldn't." His grin turned wicked. "But when have I ever done what I should?" "Eli Barrett, if you tear those muscles again, then you'll have to nurse me back to health. Again." He set the cane against the wall, offered his hand. "One dance. Clara, I've been dreaming of it for months." She couldn't refuse, didn't want to. His hand felt warm and familiar in hers as he led her onto the floor. The fiddle had switched to a slower waltz, merciful for a man still healing. Eli's hand found her waist, and suddenly they were moving. He held her closer than strictly proper, but not scandalously so. Just enough that she could feel his breath stir her hair, could smell the soap and leather scent that was uniquely him. They moved carefully at first, finding their rhythm. Then muscle memory took over, and it was like those Montana dances all over again, the world fading until it was just them and the music. "You're beautiful," he murmured, low enough only she could hear. "That dress. Clara, you take my breath away." "You're not supposed to sweet-talk me," she reminded him. "This is proper courtship, remember?" "Hang proper." His hand tightened on her waist. "I spent 3 months with you in my house, watching you make it a home, watching you work beside me, argue with me, save me in every way that matters. You think I can go back to parlor visits and careful conversation?" "Eli," but she understood. The careful distance of the past month had chafed at her too. "I know what I want," he continued, voice fierce despite its quiet. "Known it since you walked back into my life at Red Hill. Question is, do you—" The music swirled around them, other dancers, a blur of color and movement, but Clara felt still, centered, absolutely certain. "Yes," she said simply. "I want the life we started building. The partnership, the arguments about cattle prices and the quiet evenings by the fire and the work. All of it. I want to wake up in that house and know I'm home because you're there." His step faltered slightly, covered quickly. "Clara May Thompson, are you proposing to me?" Heat flooded her cheeks. That's not... Women don't..." "No," he agreed, eyes dancing. "They don't, usually." He spun her gently, drew her back close. "Good thing you've never been usual." "Eli." "Yes." She missed a step. "What?" "Yes, I'll marry you." His grin was pure joy. "If you're brave enough to ask, I'm smart enough to accept, though I had plans. You know, was going to do it proper, with a ring and everything." "You were..." Her heart felt too big for her chest. "Been carrying it for 2 weeks." He looked almost shy. "Kept trying to find the right moment, the right words. Should have known you'd beat me to it." The music was ending. Around them, dancers were stopping, applauding the musicians. But Eli kept her close, seeming to debate something. "Hell with it," he muttered, then raised his voice. "Folks, can I have your attention?" The hall quieted, all eyes turning their way. Clara felt exposed, wanted to hide, but Eli's hand was steady in hers, anchoring her. "Most of you know our story," he continued, addressing the crowd but looking at Clara. "Know we've made mistakes, both of us, No, we've done things backwards and sideways in every way but traditional. Murmurs of agreement. Some laughter. But I want you all to witness this, because a woman this brave deserves witnesses. He shifted, started to kneel. Clara caught him. "Don't you dare!" she hissed. "Your shoulder!" "Worth it," he said, but stayed standing, compromising by taking both her hands. "Clara May Thompson, you already asked and I already answered, but I'm asking back. Will you marry me, be my partner, my equal, my everything? Will you argue with me about cattle and teach me patience and make my house a home? Will you take this broken-down cowboy and make him whole?" The hall had gone silent, everyone waiting. Clara saw faces she knew, Rory grinning like a fool, Susanna dabbing at her eyes, even Hannah Morrison looking pleased. This town that had judged her, gossiped about her, ultimately accepted her back. They were all waiting for her answer, as if there was any question. "Yes," she said, loud enough for all to hear. "Yes to all of it." The cheer that went up could probably be heard in the next county. Eli swept her into his arms. Shoulder be damned, and kissed her right there in front of God and everyone. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, the fiddler struck up a celebratory reel. "When?" Clara asked, head spinning from more than the kiss. "Tomorrow wouldn't be too soon." Eli touched his forehead to hers. "But I suppose you'll want something proper." "I'm done with proper," she said, making him laugh. "Simple, soon, just us and whoever wants to witness it." "June," he suggested. "Give us time to expand the house. Add the bedroom you planned. Maybe a workroom for your sewing." "Our house," she corrected. "Our plans." "Our everything," he agreed. They stayed close the rest of the evening, accepting congratulations, making preliminary plans. Eli, tired before the night was through, his healing body still had limits, but he stayed until the last dance, holding her as the music played slow and sweet, walking her back to the boarding house under stars bright as promises. He stopped at the gate. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For being brave enough to come back, to try again, to ask for what you want." He cupped her face gently. "For seeing me clear and choosing me anyway." "Thank you," she replied. "For waiting, for forgiving, for wanting a partner instead of just a wife." "Partners," he agreed, sealing it with a kiss that promised everything: arguments and laughter, work and rest, all the complicated beauty of a life built together. When Clara finally climbed the stairs to her room, she felt like she might float away. In the mirror, her face looked different, not younger, but lighter somehow, like she'd finally set down a burden she'd carried too long. June couldn't come soon enough. Morning light filtered through new curtains Clara had sewn the week before. She stood in what was now her kitchen too, watching coffee brew, still marveling at how different everything felt. 3 months married, and she still sometimes woke expecting to find it all a dream. "You're up early." Eli's arms came around her from behind, chin resting on her shoulder. "Couldn't sleep." She leaned back into his warmth. "Too much to do." "Always is." He pressed a kiss to her neck, then moved to pour coffee. "What's on the list today?" Clara consulted the paper tacked to the wall, her innovation, keeping track of ranch tasks and her mending orders in one place. "Jenkins wants his shirts by Friday. Mary Sullivan needs that dress hemmed. And we should check the north pasture fence before the Garrett boy comes to help with branding tomorrow." Eli finished, already familiar with her thinking. "I'll ride out after breakfast. Want to come?" "Can't. Hannah Morrison's coming by with fabric she ordered from Denver. Said she had extra and thought I might want some for the shop." Eli raised an eyebrow. Hannah Morrison's being neighborly. "People change." Clara set eggs to frying. "She's getting married come fall, that banker's son from Billings." Good for her. He meant it. The old tensions had faded, replaced by the cordial distance of people who'd learned to wish each other well. They ate breakfast in comfortable rhythm, discussing the day's work. Clara's mending shop now operated from the spare room Eli had added to the house close enough to town for customers, but letting her stay home. The arrangement worked, like most things they'd figured out together. A knock interrupted their planning. Eli opened the door to find Rory, looking official despite the early hour. "Sorry to bother, but thought you should know. Sam Thompson's in town." Clara's hands stilled on the dishes. Her father. They'd exchanged letters, but she hadn't seen him since the wedding, a small affair with just close friends, where he'd walked her down the aisle of the tiny church with whiskey on his breath but pride in his eyes. "He seem all right?" Eli asked. "Sober, if that's what you're asking. Said he had business with the bank, but—" Rory hesitated. "He's at the boarding house. Been asking after you both." Clara dried her hands slowly. "I should go see him." "We should," Eli corrected. "Give me 10 minutes to saddle the horses." They found Samuel Thompson sitting on the boarding house porch, looking older but clearer-eyed than Clara remembered. He stood when he saw them, hat turning nervous in his hands. "Clara, Eli." He nodded to each. "You both look well." "Papa." Clara dismounted, uncertain. "Rory said you had business." "I did. Done now." He glanced between them, seemed to gather courage. "I sold the ranch." The words hit like cold water. "You... what?" "Sold it. To the Hendricks family. They've been wanting to expand. Offered fair price." Samuel met her shocked gaze. "Place was too big for just me. Too many ghosts." "But it's home," Clara protested, even as she understood. That ranch held her mother's memory in every board and stone. "Was home," Samuel corrected gently. "Your home's here now, with your husband." Clara felt Eli's hand on her back, steady and supporting. "What will you do?" "Heading California way. Got a cousin in Sacramento, runs a freight business. Says he could use a man who knows horses." Samuel almost smiled. "Figured it was time for a new start. Seeing you two, seeing how you figured things out, made me think maybe it's not too late for second chances." Clara moved without thinking, hugging her father for the first time in years. He stiffened, then slowly returned the embrace. "You could stay," she offered when they parted. "We've got room." "No." Samuel's voice was firm but kind. "You two need to build your life without me looking over your shoulder. But maybe I'll write, let you know how California treats me." "I'd like that," Clara said, meaning it. They talked a while longer, practical things about the sale, the journey west, addresses for letters. When Samuel finally stood to leave, he shook Eli's hand with real warmth. "Take care of her," he said. "We take care of each other," Eli replied. And Samuel nodded approval. As they watched him head toward the stage office, Clara felt a chapter closing. Not sad, exactly, but final. Her last tie to the woman she'd been was riding away on a California-bound stage. "You all right?" Eli asked. "Yes." She turned to him, surprised to find it true. "He's right. My home's here now." They rode back to the ranch quiet, each processing the morning's revelations. But as they crested the hill and their house came into view, smoke rising peaceful from the chimney, laundry dancing on the line, chickens pecking in the yard, Clara felt only rightness. This was home, not because of the place, but because of the man beside her, the life they were building board by board and day by day. That evening, Hannah Morrison did indeed come by with fabric, and they spent a pleasant hour discussing patterns and plans for Clara's shop. When she left, Clara found Eli on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. "Good day," she asked, settling beside him on the bench he'd built. "Strange day," he corrected. "But good strange." He took her hand, traced idle patterns on her palm. "Been thinking about your father, about second chances and new starts." "What about them?" "Just grateful, I guess, That we got ours. That you came back. He brought her hand to his lips. I sleep now, you know. Clara smiled, remembering, only when I'm near. Only when you're near, he confirmed. Lucky for me, that's always now. They sat as darkness gathered, not needing words. Inside waited supper to cook, orders to fill, plans to make for tomorrow and all the tomorrows after. The good work of a life being built together. But for now, they just sat, hands linked, watching stars emerge one by one in the vast Montana sky. The same stars that had witnessed their parting and their reunion, their stumbles and their finding of the way. No more goodbyes, Clara said softly. No more goodbyes, Eli agreed. And in the morning, they'd wake together and face whatever came, partners in the fullest sense. The ranch would prosper or struggle. Neighbors would gossip or accept. Seasons would turn as they always did. But none of that mattered as much as this two people who'd learned that love wasn't about perfection or protection or fitting into expected shapes. Love was choosing each other, again and again. Love was work and truth and the courage to stay. Love was coming home. Inside, the coffee pot rattled on the stove, calling them to evening chores. They rose together, walked into their house together, closed the door against the night together. Tomorrow there would be challenges, always were, but tonight there was coffee and comfortable silence and the quiet satisfaction of a day well lived. Clara reached for cups while Eli tended the fire, moving in the easy dance of people who'd found their rhythm. No more goodbyes, no more running, no more sleeping alone or waking afraid. Just this, a house becoming a home, two hearts learning to beat as one, and all the sweet, simple promise of ordinary days spent side by side. It was enough, more than enough. It was everything. Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. I hope Clara and Eli's journey touched your heart as it did mine. I'd love to hear where you're listening from. Please comment below and share your thoughts about their story. If you enjoyed this tale of second chances and true partnership, please subscribe to Wild West Stories 1850 and hit the like button. And if you want more people to discover these authentic frontier stories, please press the hype button to help this video reach more listeners. Until our next story, partners.